Hi, fourth grade friends. I'm so excited today to do some weaving with you. Hopefully you just watched that video on how tapestries are made and how weaving works and how the threads are colored, and hopefully you enjoyed that. Here are the materials that you need for your weaving project. Scissors, tape, and then you need either craft sticks, which are like popsicle sticks like this. Probably the bigger sizes are better, but even if you only have a small size like that, it will work. And if you don't have craft sticks, see if you have chopsticks like this. They could even be the metal kind, but the wood kind works great too. Then you'll need a piece of cardboard. This is probably about 3 inches by 8 inches or so, 7 or 8 inches or so. You need a little bit thicker cardboard, so more of like a cardboard box. Probably cereal box cardboard is too thin for this project. And then you need various yarns. Now, if you don't have yarns and you're not able to get any, you can experiment with using different things. You can try ribbons, like if you have curling ribbon, or you could try string. It'll take a very, very long time to do with string because it's thin. But you can experiment with different things, and if you use something other than yarn, I would love to hear how it goes and what you used. When you're picking your yarn, if you have options, the thicker the yarn is, the faster this will go and kind of the easier. So yarns come in all kinds of different thicknesses, and it's totally fine to use the thin yarn. It's just going to take a lot longer. So some people really enjoy weaving, and if you enjoy that and don't mind if it takes a really long time, then you can choose the thin one. And if you don't have different thicknesses, just use whatever ones you have. Okay, let's get started. The first thing to do is to take your cardboard rectangle, and you're going to cut about every 1/2 inch along your cardboard rectangle, about a 1/2 inch in. So I'll show you what that looks like. Now, when you do your other side, it is important that it lines up with the one across and that there's the same number, okay? So I want to make sure. Okay, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you'd like to mark those with pencils before you do it, you can do that. The first thing that you want to do is you want to set up your warp strings, okay? The warp strings are the ones that go up and down. Okay, I'm going to use this red to make my strings. You got to find the end. Come here, end, where are you? I'm going to tuck it into my first notch and then loop it around. I want to pull this fairly tight, not so tight that it breaks or makes the cardboard bend, but pretty tight, okay? No loosey-goosey stuff. Around the back, through the front, around the back, through the front. Make sure to keep some tension. That means pulling a little bit so that these are fairly tight. Now in the back, my slots are holding these pretty tight, but just to be sure, I think I'm just going to tie these together. Okay, that's what you should have. Now we're going to weave our weft yarns. Now, if you chose popsicle sticks, there's a little trick that you can do to make it easier to weave in and out of the yarns, and that's to put a popsicle stick in the middle and turn it. That makes it just easier to reach the undersides. If you have chopstick, you can do the same thing with a chopstick in the middle. It lifts it a little bit. You can also do it on the ends. So I think I'll demonstrate with a chopstick on the ends like this, and then I'll do my weaving with a popsicle stick. Should I use the large or small one? Which one's probably most of you, if you have these, might have a smaller size. I'll demonstrate with the smaller size. Okay, now I want to attach my my yarn to my popsicle stick. I'm gonna demonstrate just taping because I figure most of you will have tape at the ready and you don't need a grown-up's help for that. So you want to really push this tape on tight. You don't need tons of tape, but you want it so that as this pulls, the string doesn't come, or the yarn does not come off of your stick, okay? If we were in class, we would be using needles for this. We would be using sewing needles that are, they're not the really tiny, super sharp metal kind. They're larger, like some of them are even as long like this, and they're plastic and they don't have a sharp tip. But this works just as well, and I don't think most of you would have those. Okay, now I'm going to stretch out my yarn and kind of measure it about my full arm's length times 2. And I'm going to cut it. Okay, now this is about how much yarn I have. You'll get the hang of it, of how much to cut when you get going. Okay, now you can choose whether you want to do your first one under the first string or over it, but whichever you choose, you've got to do the opposite for the next one. Okay, so I'm going to go over my first one and then under my second one. Over my first one, under my second one, over my first one, under my second one, all the way through. And when I pull that, the yarn will follow. And I'm going to pull my yarn all the way through. And I want to make sure that when it comes towards the end, I slow down a little and check it. And I want to leave a nice tail, okay? So leave at least, that's about 3 or 4 inches of tail at the end. Now I'm going to come back and go the other direction. When I come back, I need to do the opposite of what I did for this first row. So since the first row on the first warp string here, this is an under, I need to go over. Okay, so if I went under again, it wouldn't hold. So if it's under on the row below, you need to go over. And see here, my yarn is over and I'm under. So it's going to be the opposite of what I did last time. Pull it through. Now you can see that these are kind of, there's a space between here. If you have another extra popsicle stick, you can do a neat thing that they do on real looms, which is this little stick that slides down and pushes those a little bit tighter like that. They don't need to be ultra tight, but they should be more or less touching. And you can do that every couple of rows, or you can just use your fingers to slide it down. Okay, now am I going to start over or under on this row? My last one I went under, so I'm going to start over. And just keep doing this until you run out of the thread that you cut. Now, I want to give you a little tip here. You'll notice if you pull your yarn too tight, these threads will start to stretch and you'll make your weaving go in. You don't want to do that. You want to pull it just the right amount that your thread stays straight and that the width of this stays straight throughout. So you don't want it to get skinnier and skinnier as you go along. Try to keep these straight by not pulling too hard. Okay, now I'm getting close to running out of my yarn for this color that I've cut. When that happens, you're going to just snip it off and leave a tail going out to the side. You don't need to do anything else other than just snip that off. Okay, now I'm going to pick a new color. The other thicker color that I had was this black one. I'm going to do the same thing I did last time and get about 2 spread out arms lengths of this thread, of this yarn. I'm going to tape it to my popsicle stick. Nice and tight, squeeze it on there. Okay, now, very important when you're starting a new color or a new piece of thread is, and if, by the way, if you want to use the same color and keep going, you can. But when your thread length, or excuse me, when your yarn length runs out like that, you need to cut it and leave a tail, and then you need to come in from the same side. That's important because once we pull this all the way through, we're going to tie at the end when we are done with our weaving, we're going to tie these two together, so the tails need to be on the same side. We wouldn't want to start on this side if we ended on that side. So starting from the same side, I'm going to follow the same rules I have been, which is that if this is an under, I'm going to start over. I'm going to pull it through until I have a tail left on this side. And I'm just going to leave it laying there like that. Coming back, starting over, same as you have been. Careful not to pull that string too tight so that it starts squeezing in. Okay, now I've about reached where I can't fit my popsicle stick through the end there, so even though I have more thread, that's about it for this weaving, okay? So, you want to cut, leaving a tail again, cut off the rest of your yarn. You can add as many pieces as you want, so if you made a little bit larger of a loom or your yarn is a lot thinner, so you had to do a lot more rows to reach the end, you can change out the color or the pieces of your yarn as many times as you want. Every single time you do that though, make sure the 2 tails are going out the same side. Now that we've reached the end, we pull out our spacers. We'll want to start by tying together any tails from where the 2 yarns changed colors or changed pieces. And you can just tie them together like a shoelace, just 2 times, like that. Now, we need to remove our weaving from the loom now. What we're going to do is just turn it over to the back and cut these work threads all in half, okay? So you should have little tails of your work threads on both ends, and we're just going to take them off of our loom. Okay, and we're left with our weaving like this. Now, the first, we need to also tie these end pieces together. The first one that we want to do is the beginnings of our yarns and the end of our yarn with one of the warp threads. Okay, and then we want to tie together the next two warp threads. Now, if you've got an even number of warp threads, that makes it a little bit easier, but since I don't, I'm going to use one from the previous tie. Okay, so these are all tied off. This side one is tied off. Now I'm going to start with my yarn on this end and tie it off. And I think I'm going to use my yarn again to tie this second one so that I have an even number left on this side that I can tie together. That'll make it a little easier. Alright, now I have 4 of my warp threads left, and I'm going to tie 2 of them together and then the other 2 together. You don't want to yank too hard as you're tying this, just gently enough that your yarns are touching but not overly squeezed. If this tying part gets frustrating or too tricky for you, just ask your grown-up to help you with it, okay? Now, a couple things can happen. For these side ones, we usually want to try to tuck them in. This part is a lot trickier without a needle. So cut them pretty short, and then what you're going to want to do is just find a loop on the end. Here, I'll do this a little bit closer. Find a loop on the end and just push it up through that loop until it's all disappeared and tucked away so you can't see it. Okay, so this is the second loop. I'm pushing it through, the third loop. And this is just so it looks a little bit neater and doesn't have things dangling off the sides. If you don't mind that or you like it, you can just leave that, but this is just to kind of tidy it up. So you just keep finding loops of the same color and just kind of tuck it in there, tuck it through. Okay, now you can do the same thing for your other one. Okay, now some people like these tassels on the ends. You can leave them, you can cut them very short or at least a little bit shorter, or you can also tuck them back in like I did with the side ones. One little fun extra thing that you can do is if you happen to have any beads at your house, you can add beads to the tassels at the end. And you can just tie a knot to stop the bead from coming off, or you can tie it to another tassel. Okay, I hope you enjoyed learning about weaving. I hope you enjoyed learning about tapestries and how they're made. I hope you learned about the process of making yarn in different colors. I'd love to see you experiment and try new and different things with your weaving. If you really enjoyed it, you can try making a much larger one. You could try tying the tassels of yours together to make like a little hand warmer or finger warmer or bracelet. Experiment, get creative, and see what you can do. Another fun thing that you can do with beads is, in addition to tying them to the end, is that you can add beads throughout your weaving by just pulling a yarn up through the middle of your weaving, just a separate yarn, and then going through a bead and then back down your weaving. Okay, so now you have a bead attached right to the middle, and you can do the same thing anywhere you like on your weaving. So just keep coming up anywhere you want to bead. String your bead through and then go back down. Make sure that you're just in a different row when you go back down so it doesn't just slide out. Okay, and you can do that all over. Well, I'd love to see what you guys created. Please take a picture or have a grown-up take a picture of what you made and email it to me. My email address is on the Canyon Rim website and also on the art page on Canyon Rim's class pages. So hope you enjoyed this and we'll see you next week.